Hello. Today we're going to begin thinking about figure drawing. That is the technique in art where we're drawing the human body. Often it's drawing from life, and that's going to be, we're going to do our best estimate of that remotely. But before we even get into looking at an actual human figure, we need to think about the proportion of the body. So humans are obviously diverse. Not everyone is the same height. Not everyone's proportion of head to body or arms to legs or these all proportions are different on individual humans, but in general, the basic guideline is that the human body is 7.5 heads high. So we have 1, 2 head, 3 head, 4 head, 5 head, 6 head, 7 head, and a half. So when we're sketching, that's sort of the guideline that we're trying to get to maintain proportion of the body. So when we think about drawing the body, we think about the body being in basically a straight line from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. There's a halfway point. This one suggests that it's 8 heads high, so there's a little variation in what people say is the proportion. I think that the general knowledge is 7.5, but if you draw your body 8 heads high, it's not going to look wrong necessarily. That may be right for some people. So we want to think about the body being about 7.5 heads high, and we have the hips and the shoulders, which are each going to also get a line. On men, the shoulders are wider than the hips, so the hips would be about 2 heads width, and the shoulders would be about 2.5. On women, that's switched. The hips are wider than the shoulders, so the shoulders would be 2 head widths, and the hips would be 2.5. Your arms come down about just shy of 3 head lengths down from your head, and your knees hit at about 2 up from the bottom. So this is sort of a guideline for the basic structure of the body, and I'll let you look at that more closely. When we think about the materials that we need for figure drawing, we're going to be doing a lot of sketches, and none of them is going to be about having a final piece. I like to say that figure drawing is the yoga of art making. It's about the practice. Those of you who have taken yoga, it's not about making a final product or performing or necessarily being better than someone else. It's just about doing the motions and feeling that in your body and becoming better at those motions within yourself. That's what figure drawing is for me. It's just about the practice of looking and drawing and recognizing things. So we're not trying to create this final work of art that's beautiful. So the paper we're putting this on is not important. It can be, we're going to do a lot of sketches, and so I want you to collect a bunch of paper that isn't important to you. You can use a good sketchbook for this. There's nothing wrong with that. It just may not be the best use of that paper. Instead, I'm going to encourage you to go find an old folder of stuff you don't need anymore and find the pages that just have writing on one side and use the other side for this. You can use ruled paper or a lined paper, that's fine. Just find a bunch of paper that maybe you don't care that much about. It doesn't have to be beautiful final paper. We want a pencil. And it would be great if you had some other thing like charcoal or a pastel or even like a thicker marker or a crayon will do. You can have an eraser, but we're not going to have time to erase. That's another thing about figure drawing is that we're going to be moving quickly through our drawings so that we are putting decisive, confident lines down and spending our time looking and drawing rather than perfecting and erasing. Again, it's about the act of this, not about the perfection of it. So you can have an eraser, but I'm going to discourage you from spending a lot of time using it. Our first type of drawing will be 1-minute sketches. They're going to be linear figure drawings, and we're going to be paying attention to the pose and the proportion. So your job in that 1 minute is to get down the head, a backbone, a line for the shoulders, a line for the hips, 2 lines for each arm, and 2 lines for each leg, and then little ovals for the hands and feet. That's And with those, so you're trying to get those down, you're trying to get them in the correct direction and pose, but you're also trying to get the correct proportion. So you're going to be checking after each one to see if you're at about 7.5 head lengths, and if, the proportion of the upper body to the lower body feels accurate. So I'll be demonstrating that in a little bit. Then we'll move on to 5-minute sketches, where we'll start with that same linear form, but on top of that form, we're going to put, on top of those lines, we're going to put these forms, these 3D like rectangular prism type shapes and cylinders. Cylinders for the arms and legs, and these 3D shapes for the torso and head, to try to show the shape and form, that three-dimensional blockiness of the body. And again, we're paying attention to form and to the pose and the proportion. Then we'll move on to 8-minute sketches, where on top of that boxy form, so we'll start with the lines, then we'll add the forms, and then we'll add contour, the edges. Now, those contours shouldn't cling. It's not like we're drawing right around the edges of these boxes and cylinders. Instead, we're encasing, we're sort of clothing them loosely and finding the shapes and contours of the body that those forms indicate. Eventually, next week during our figure drawing live model experience, we'll be adding some value to it. So once we've got the line and the form and the contour, then we'll be using that charcoal or pastel or crayon to add some value, some lights and darks, to show the figure as a three-dimensional form. Okay, so that's where we're headed. This is a unit that we're sort of rushing here at the end. I would usually love to spend a little more time on it, but we don't have that much more time. You can always do more sketches than I propose, but I'm excited to introduce you to this process.